going to hit the record button for us. It is being recorded so that you'll be able to go back to it later, check it out, find things you missed. Your mics, we ask to have them muted. Each session is about 60 minutes long. If you have any questions, use the chat. Type them in there. We'll try and get to them. If not, we'll use one of the later sessions in the conference to get to them. Hopefully, you will find refreshments and restrooms nearby you. If not, you'll want to check that out. You'll want to get those arranged. Shalise gives us a listening tip here of using a tactical object like a pen or pencil cup. Keep your hands from multitasking. At this point, I would like to introduce Bob Consitis, who is going to be our presenter. He started in the Extension Business Office as Robert 14 years ago. That office became FAES Fiscal Service Center, where he learned how to process transactions for other FAES departments. Then 5 years ago, he stepped into the fiscal officer role for the Central Unit Finance team. He confused us all when changed his preferred name to Bob after Workday started. Currently, he is a cost center manager in Workday, supporting central units such as advancement and international programs, along with the South Centers, the Extension Administration offices, and 3 of the 4 program areas, CD, A&R, and FCS. Welcome, Bob.
Thank you, Marianne. I appreciate it. So yeah, we are here today, and if I could just get my
Let me
fun
start sharing here.
Story of the week. Can you hear me okay?
Maybe.
Can you hear me okay?
I can, yes.
Okay, good. Just want to make sure. So yeah, the question was, just to start out with, was what was your favorite thing so far this week? Well, my son actually broke his arm last week, my 6-year-old. But so this week I got to take him to a follow-up appointment on Wednesday, and just seeing that kid just in a good mood, you know, after being down about breaking his arm and going out and eating lunch with him, that just made my week. So that was fun. So what is this session all about? With the kickoff session, I mean, we have kick off our Extension Support Staff Conference, and then we go dive right into Workday Q&A. My goodness, can you get any more boring than that stuff, right? I mean, this is the first one, right? Workday Q&A. We have some questions that came in through the registration process. And I'm going to share my screen. And then we have 2 other extension operations and Workday related sessions today. So I just kind of want to clarify what we're here for today. That is not my PowerPoint. Where'd it go? I'm going to move that over to here. All right, can everyone see my PowerPoint? If I can just get someone to raise a hand.
Yes, it can be seen.
All right. Yeah, so Workday Q&A, navigating fiscal processes. First, I want to start out with a quote that I just saw this morning. It says, "Never worry about numbers. Help one person at a time and always start with the person nearest to you." And that's by Mother Teresa. So since I saw that and I noticed it, and I thought, if you're like me, kind of in this place of in the job being overwhelmed and kind of feel like there's so many things going on, maybe you feel behind in your work like I do, and you know, it's not about the number of issues I can tackle in a day. You know, it's all about just helping one person at a time. And so today, think of that. You can help me, you know, as one person at a time with your questions and answers and sharing your what you've learned about Workday in this session. You know, feel free to chime in on certain things as it comes up. But yeah, just start with one person at a time. So what are we doing here today? We have 3 sessions. So today we have Workday Q&A. On Friday, there's an extension operations autumn fiscal update. And then on Tuesday next week, we have a session called Workday Financial Reporting, a deeper look into the financial reports. So what's the difference between these? So I was thinking about this week. Today, we want to start out with a question and answer session about how to navigate Workday, starting with the questions that were brought up in the registration process, some tips and tricks that I learned through the way, go through some more, and then also, of course, in Workday, what's in Workday, the financial report. So we'll start talking about financial reports as questions come up about that. Gather some situations to talk about so we can dive into them on the Tuesday session, Workday financial reporting, and then just keep it open for question and answer about questions specific to Workday. So how's that different than Friday's session? Because the extension operations autumn fiscal finance update, yeah, we help you very much with the Workday. You can't pull those apart at fiscal update and Workday. But so Friday's session is going to go over more of what the extension operations team does, kind of give a look, kind of step back a little bit and take a look at the operations website and how to navigate things, find out certain issues, then talk about some hot topic fiscal policies and processes. And then Tuesday, we can game plan after we game planning and looking at things that we learned today. And we're going to do what we say there, take a deeper look into financial reports. So we'll take a look more into more questions about Workday financial reports. And then I'll go through a demo about how to use pivot table and how I take some of the data that is pulled from Workday and how do I manipulate it and format it. And then you can also chime in on how you like to use Excel, and then answer additional Workday specific questions. So that's the overview. So I'm going to go. Let's just pull up Workday. And just to let you know, Workday for me always navigates a little bit slower when I'm on a Zoom meeting. So if there's some dead space here, so I'm just waiting for a report, whatever to pull. So I want to go just dive into some questions here, and then we can kind of jog the conversations from there. So let's take a look at one of the questions that I see issues with still is so I'm new to creating requisitions. And I'm having error messages when I'm submitting my requisitions. So I go here, request travel or purchase, and I have a requisition to start. So I'll do this, request goods or services. Then you get to this header page, which is pulling up. You first asked the requisition type, and just because this is still a point of confusion sometimes, I just want to point out that when you use the requisition type, like when you look at this, think about what I see is 2 different options for the most part. You're using Buckeye Buy request, and that's only for when you're actually purchasing through the Buckeye Buy marketplace catalog, or you're going to do a non-catalog. So these requests, and that's for any supplier that's not in the Buckeye Buy marketplace, or if you have to request a new supplier because there is not one that you can find in the system. So the question is, next is deliver to and ship to addresses. So in the office address. So here's the question. So your default address might be your county office address, and it might not have a floor number on it. or a room number. And if that is showing up without one, Workday will not let it go through. So you actually have to change your workspace. So all who are having issues with that, just make sure you change my work. Let's see, and then have it come up. So you can change your own workspace. Let's see if, discard that. If I can navigate this here, because my location is agriculture administration. So for demonstration purposes, let's see if I can pull up. Let's just go with pick on Ross County for Marianne, but no, it's not going to let me. It's not going to let me do that. But basically, if it just said agriculture administration, I'm going to look for an option of floor, the floor option of the room number. Okay, so let's say you try to do that and there is no floor option or room option. We've had that issue come up a couple times. I know, I forget what county it is, but I know Sarah Mays and I are working on right now a request to add a floor number or a room number. So if you're getting the error message that you need a floor number or a room number on your workspace and you can't get the requisition through, reach out to the extension operations team, Sarah, Vicky, Patty, and then me to get that address updated. We'll find the correct forms to get those submitted. All right, so that is the workspace question. So before I move into another topic, let's see if, oh, Sarah, looks like Sarah, you've got it. Oh, you got the job aid linked. Thank you. Vicky's, yes, it's confirmed delivered to location that shows floor and room number. Yeah. Okay. So I just wanted to pause for a second to see what other initial requisition based questions you might have. And I know we're still early here and people kind of warming up to what they can ask. There's no question too basic to ask. But now that I've paused here, I'm going to go right back to it. I want to go back into requisition panels. So we're going to go back to requisition entry. And there are a bunch of situations that we could go through right now. We've answered a lot of them in our extension operations open office hours every 2 weeks on Monday mornings that Jesse was hosting before he went on paternity leave, and then I started hosting. But I want to go through some situations that I see recently on navigating through the requisition panels. So just want to first put that, let's go say we're doing a non-catalog request. So we're trying to set up a purchase order in advance to pay for a goods or service. And buying tools, which is what we'll talk about a little bit in the extension operations update, is that purchasing is really pushing back on a lot of the goods and services that we were buying before through other buying tools like local checking account and P-card. They're pushing back into purchase orders. So over the last 10 months, I've seen a lot of questions on navigating through the purchase order and accounts payable entry process, because it's a little more difficult to get something entered on a requisition for a purchase order and then paid through the accounts payable process. So first of all, I appreciate your patience on that as we've worked through those situations in the first year. So there we go. Non-catalog requisition means we're paying a supplier that's either in the system or we need to request a new supplier. So we're going to request non-catalog items from there. these two radial buttons are really important in my world. When I see something, say, let's take catering, because catering has been, now that we've had some more in-person programming go along, that catering has come up more and more, and we're trying to push catering purchases to purchase orders instead of P cards. And catering is a service, and anytime I see something that is questionable between a good or a service, say there is a good that you're buying, but there's a service that comes with it, like catering, you're getting the food, but the service is that they're providing the food, they're bringing the food, preparing the meals. So anything that you can put on a service is always helpful. One of the many issues in our accounts payable process is that the purchase orders, especially from legacy purchase orders, all transitioned into goods purchase orders. And we found out through accounts payable that invoices are not paying because there's a whole different set of rules that go into when you're trying to pay an invoice on a goods PO. So there's a lot more issues that can come up when you create a goods PO. So if you can do request service, and then you do your spend category, and anytime that your spend category has a service in there, you can always put in there. So if you put in catering, oh, it doesn't say service on there exactly, but because that kind of looks like a good, but I always tell people, put food catering in as a service to avoid issues on the accounts payable process. So just to go through this here, and I did this on an office hours, but this is still something I see often. So we're talking about navigating through these fiscal processes, that when you're doing a new requisition, okay, so you picked which type it is, then you start seeing all these fields. Here's a description field, then there's a memo field, and then we continue shopping, and then there's an internal memo field. There's like, what, 4 places to put in information. I just want to broadcast out, just remember that in your description field here, that is exactly what you're buying. So if you're buying catering for such and such a date, or if you have a quote number, quote for services on such and such a date, consulting services, blah, 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 for such, that's where you put in. It's just a simple shortened description based on your quote or your agreement, if you have one, or whatever. So, I'm buying 4 tires for a tractor. I've seen that one come through. So this is description is keep it short and keep it focused on what you are buying. So commodity code, don't have to worry about that. Supplier, just since we're on this page, say something. So let's say we're looking up a supplier, and this is a good place to look up suppliers just in general. So you can look here and see if you can find supplier information. Now, I don't know if everyone on this call has the access to see this 3 little buttons here, but this related actions button means that you can click on this and get some more information on the supplier. So it shows approved. It gives a little bit more information. It gives the remit to address, because that's not listed here. So you can do a little more searching on that. And while we're on that subject, Workday, looking at suppliers, most of you should have the access related to this to actually view the supplier. So before you actually get to the point of entering the requisition, what I do is I type in view supplier, and then that brings up that, and you can actually look up the supplier in here specifically. And then once you get into these panels, you can find a lot more information. Say you want to know what other purchase orders are out there, you can dive into that. the purchase orders, you can find purchase orders, you can look up invoices and payments. Say you know that you have a supplier, but you don't remember what the purchase order is. In my world, that's a lot more the case, since I support different units, and sometimes suppliers have POs with different units, different departments. Then you can look at, where is it? I think it's overview and then payment details. Say you want to know what the default payment terms are, like so for this supplier, All in Good Taste Catering, Metro Cuisine, it is net 60. So if you want to look up, okay, so how long is it going to take to get a supplier paid from the invoice date? You can look here at the default payment terms. If you don't have access to this view supplier report, you can send me an email and I can get you access to it. So while we're on a handy report or task, I do want to point out this feature here, which I like to use. It's the 4 squares. It's the My Shortcuts button. You can actually create shortcuts. Here I've got a lot saved already. You can add in reports or tasks into this. What you do is you add, and then you can just put in this. So you actually have to type it out, find it, make sure it's in there. It searches, comes up, click View Supplier. And then you get to click OK. And then once that is done, you can just navigate that way. You don't have to remember every single name of every single report, because in Workday, it can kind of get a little bit confusing on exactly what language, or if you have to make something plural or not, just to find something. So I heavily recommend using My Shortcuts when you can. So this is kind of your first way of finding reports in Workday, your quick shortcuts in Workday. And then when you go into reports later, we can talk about how to create filters on those certain reports or saving filters. So that's that. And Marianne, I'm not looking at the chat. Was there any questions that have come up just so far in this? Demonstration demo. Let's see. Well, looks like there's some questions that have come in. Oh, good. Some Q&A on other things that have been answered. But I scrolled through and did not see anything on requisitions.
Sorry, I didn't realize I was muted. I was talking to you the whole time.
Were you? Okay.
Yeah, I was.
She's
You
just
didn't
like,
hear
that's
me?
not my job. You do it
I'm
yourself. Oh, here we go.
I'm so sorry. I think the questions had been answered.
Yeah.
Now Candy just came up with one. What if the supplier doesn't show up?
Yeah, that was where I was going next. Exactly. Yeah. So if the supplier doesn't show up here, or if you can't find it in that view supplier report, then in that report. So then, and just to let you know, this view supplier report, it's pretty generous on, unlike other searches, if you put in just simple things, this report does a pretty good job of, if they have a does business as name, that this search will find it. So you can be more vague in this search and search on different things. It doesn't have to be as specific as that search bar, that Workday search bar above is. So yeah, so you search for it a couple of different ways. You know that let's just say you know that you've worked with someone in the past, and you're saying, I worked with this person in the past, or the supplier, are they in there? I'm just looking up Ron Cole. Okay, well, Ron's in there. Okay, forget which one I was talking about. So if it's not in view supplier, and if you can't find it in here, the next thing to do is you're going to have to add them as a vendor, or in Workday language, it's called supplier. So how do you add a supplier in Workday? Now, let's see, in old world, you would have to get the vendor setup form and well, in old world, maybe you get the vendor setup form first and then set them up as a vendor before, say you put in the e-request. Now everything's done in this requisition process. So you have to go to, so you have to send the vendor's supplier vendor setup form, get that information, and then add it to your Workday requisition. And tab, let's go to, so where do you find the vendor setup form if you don't have it saved? Because this vendor setup form does update occasionally. And I was told that if you don't have the most current version of the vendor setup form, that our supplier maintenance team will not accept it. So I'm going to go to the purchasing page really quick. So we go business and finance, we go to purchasing. And we go down here, it's down here in vendor maintenance. Forms, and then vendor setup forms. And this gives you some more information about if you're working with foreign entities and things like that. So that's vendor setup form, you have to log in, I think, to get that. And you can find it here. So what I did is I just created a shortcut to this link, so I can just directly navigate to it instead of saving it on my desktop. I mean, I do have it saved on my desktop, but so you get that vendor setup form, send that to the vendor that you're working with, get that form back, and then attach it to your requisition when you're checking out here. And I'll tell you that this process has been, I guess, a little bit uncomfortable for me because I don't like emailing, just so I could talk here, I don't like emailing forms back and forth, especially with this private information on it, right? So social security numbers, voided checks, things like that. But what I've talked to, when I talked to the vendor maintenance form team, they say it's, yep, there you go. Vicky says, when you're working with vendor setup, leave the supplier field empty. Yeah, but yeah, it's a little bit concerning when I start emailing back and forth forms with that restricted information on it, that sensitive data. I've learned from our IT team that you put in the message, like ask the vendor to return the vendor form through email, and put in OSU secure in either the body of the email or the subject, and that will get some more, that'll get flagged that email for the maintenance team, or not maintenance, the security team to look at that and kind of and make that encoded, but it's still not the best. So I still sometimes call up vendors and have them complete some of the vendor form, and then they call me up, give me their social security number when they're concerned about those security issues. The voided check, there's really not much you can do because the business and finance team is saying that needs to be attached to the requisition, so that has to go through us. So if you're like me and kind of feel like, why am I doing this? This something that I shouldn't be handling these forms. Well, right now we are handling these forms and we are putting them, attaching them to the requisition. So that's kind of what I know about that. Oh, what did I just see in the chat? Yeah, I don't like emailed confidential information back and forth either. Yeah, Thali, yeah. Now, Thali, was there when you were in accounts payable, was there like a certain kind of think of an umbrella way to handle these? Do you have any tips and tricks in that arena by chance?
In terms of supplier forms?
Yeah.
How do I put this? Well, first of all, let me share. Let me pull you up here. So, okay, there you go. I'm not looking down. One of the things I would like to share is that let's say you've used a vendor in the past when we were in PeopleSoft, and you can go into eRequest and you can find them and you swear that they were set up as a vendor. Look to see if you paid by P card. If you paid by P card and not a PO, they would never have had a vendor set up. And in the other situation that can happen is if the vendor wasn't active like with the last 16 to 18 months, they would have been marked as inactive in PeopleSoft and not have migrated over into Workday. So just keep those in mind. I agree, Bob. I used to work actually at the OSU College of Pharmacy, and I had to handle student confidential information, and the idea of emailing things back and forth was just really, really uncomfortable. And we had protocols for that, but it doesn't seem like we have a really strict protocol for vendor maintenance forms. And I would agree, sometimes filling out the forms as much as you can, or invite the supplier to fill them out as much as they can, and then call them for the Social Security number if it's an individual. I believe EIN numbers can be found online for companies, so that's not big of a deal. The one thing that is tricky is, and I don't know if you're going to address this, Bob, is the OPERS form that individuals have to fill out. That's a whole nother ball of gunk.
That is true. I haven't, yeah, I mean, that's certainly something. So when me and Jesse first understood this, that we understood that the OPERS form only needed to be completed by individuals. But then we learned that it's not just individuals, it's sole proprietors, basically anyone that, it's not like a full-on, like a company, or if it's just a partnership. So it expands more than just individuals. So we were thinking that, okay, it's just individuals. If you have a business name, that it's not going to affect you. Well, yeah, that has kind of been another
hitch.
Yeah, that has kind of exploded over the last 10 months. The OPERS form, I have that saved. I'm just thinking, can I navigate to that quickly to show everyone where to get that online? I don't know if you do by chance, but
I have actually downloaded it. So
yeah,
basically, to explain, the OPERS form allows someone who's an individual or perhaps a private contractor who's not designate and confirm they are not an employee of the Ohio State University, and therefore any OPERS contribution is not taken out of any payments. Now you're probably wondering, well, we know they're not an OSU staff member. But there are OSU staff members who also do work for the university as independent contractors. And that's a whole nother ball of wax. But this form, what I basically do, I'm working with a supplier right now. She is a sole proprietor, and she had to complete that because on the maintenance form she checked sole proprietor. So I just use it as a default document. We have some people who are coming to the FCS conference next week to be speakers, and I included it in the information I sent to them. Even if it's not needed, it's done, so.
Yeah, thank you. And Vicki put the link for the form on the extension operations site. Thank you, Vicki. I forgot that was on there. Yeah, so go ahead.
Can I also mention one more thing? And you just alluded to and talking about a voided check. My understanding from working at accounts payable when they were moving into Workday is they made a stipulation that if the individual or company wanted a check payment, it would automatically be marked as net 90. And that means that the individual or the company is going to be paid 90 days after the date on the invoice. So by all means, even though it's sensitive information, encourage your suppliers and the individuals you work with to go ahead and complete the entire vendor maintenance form, including the banking information, and that way they can get paid by EFT. And the difference in getting paid was one of my first tasks when I started at AP was working with a dairy farm that is in a clinical study with the College of Veterinary Medicine. And they're like, okay, well, where's our money? And like, it says in the system, you wanted to check, you're not going to see it for 90 days. So by all means, encourage people, if they feel comfortable, to receive an electronic payment. Checks are only printed at accounts payable on Thursdays. And like the cutoff to get in the check run is 3 p.m. on Wednesday. If they go with an EFT payment or electronic payment, they should get an email that says, this payment has been processed, please check your bank statement. So whenever possible.
Thank you.
Mhm.
That's helpful information. Yeah, suppliers, adding suppliers, paying by EFT, and then checks are definitely have been an issue, and
Yes.
it caused concern. So that's just a good reminder that, yeah, net 90 as a check. Yeah, we want to do is electronic payments whenever possible. Right. So let's look at the chat. I'll mention Vicky's last statement here. EFT is net 60 or less if okay with accepting less. This is listed on the vendor setup form. So Vicky, I expect you're talking about so that vendors can request net 30, but it's done through the vendor's setup form.
Yes, and they have to be willing to take, have a discount price for us in order to do that, I believe. And that's all spelled out on that form.
Good. Let's, well, I want to address Karen's question here first. So could it be possible to add the supplier name as an option to some of the Workday reports we use for reconciling and budgeting? And yeah, we'll dive more into that on Tuesday in terms of which reports have that. So Karen, I don't know if you've noticed or others have noticed that while we have these reports as the managerial trial balance and some equity balances that you can dive into those reports, I use sources and uses, that you can get some information on those reports, but it doesn't have all the information like expense report and then supplier name. So it just kind of depends on which report you are in. Like I know in sources and uses, you can get the supplier name information on those reports when you have supplier invoices, but you can't get the actual like the requisition or PO number on there, which kind of makes it a little bit frustrating that, then you have to go in and do a fine journal lines report, which is what I do. So I always run a fine journal lines report for any data that I'm looking for, just to have that in the background, and then I manipulate that report and dive into it. So we'll talk about that more on Tuesday. Debbie's question, are you going to discuss invoice payments? I can try to discuss invoice payments in a very non-emotional, quick way. So invoice payments we're still, so yeah, the session is Workday navigating fiscal processes and submitting payments on a purchase order through accounts payable is definitely a Workday related process, right? So you've done your job. Let's say you jump through you got all your requisition entry done. It's approved through the system. Cost center manager approved it. Department leader approved it if they need to. It wasn't sent back. The service center processed it, approved it, turned into a purchase order. Now you have the PO number. Fast forward, you have the invoice, and that invoice is sent to accounts payable. And then nothing happens.
Would you like the secret on that?
If there's a secret, yeah, we'll go ahead.
Okay. When that invoice goes in through AP invoices at osu.edu, it actually goes into a system whose Brainware.
Yep.
It's optical recognition software. And that Brainware is going to go looking for the PO number and try to match up the structure of the PO with the structure of the invoice. So if there's some discrepancy, Brainware will kick it into another queue in a problem queue, and it can sit there and roll around for days. A good example is maybe your PO had only 2 lines on it, but the invoice has 5. It's not going to match up in Brainware, so Brainware is going to kick it out. There are other reasons for some reason why Brainware will kick it to another queue. It's like if the remittance address doesn't match what's in the system, that can be a problem.
Mm.
If the PO is actually old and there's no money on it, it will kick it back. So what I like to do with the suppliers I work with is actually suggest to them how they can set up the invoice to match the exact purchase order. If it's something really big like equipment or supplies or something, and you have a lot of lines, that's where it doesn't match up. When Brainware is a good teenage child, it moves quite seamlessly. But I can tell you that what gets stuck are things for bakery products and cleaning services on laundry and your custodial services, and anything that has a lot of lines in that invoice may or may not match up with the PO and get kicked into another queue where someone actually has to physically go in and index it out of there.
Very good. Yeah, you are our resident accounts payable expert, because how long ago did you get moved into FCS? Has it been
I worked for OSU accounts payable from October of last year through the transition and
then
through May of this year, and I joined
this year,
FCS
right.
in the middle of June.
Yeah, so you know the secrets of accounts payable and the Brainware. Yeah, Brainware moving.
Some of them.
Well,
some of them.
Yes, but you know a lot more than I do fighting through a lot of these invoices. So thank you.
Oh, and when in doubt, always add a line on your PO for shipping.
Okay, even if it's not written into the agreement or the contract.
If there's this way, a lot of the Buckeye buy suppliers that I've been using, the shipping is included. And sometimes when I go in and do the requisition, I make sure that I put in the internal memo box, per Buckeye buy contract, shipping is included, confirmed by supplier. If there's any way, you think, well, I'll give you a good example. We often order materials here in the FCS office for the different counties and different areas. And even Uniprint, actually Uniprint's not good. Thermometers, I ordered tons of thermometers. And what the vendor was going to do, or supplier was going to do, is charge us for the shipping fee each time that was sent out to a different office. I needed to make sure those lines were actually on the PO, so it doesn't kick in an exception that says, you didn't include the shipping. So.
Yeah, and that's a working issue here, is that we found out. So we found out a few months ago that we're supposed to break out our quotes as much as possible, but a common issue that I've come up with in talks with the service center is catering is a nightmare trying to get that in. So I tell people that, I don't know what Brainware's default way of handling those catering is, but I tell people that don't do a line by line catering requisition. You can't. There's just way too many things that we were told by the service center to break those lines out, separate those lines by what you're buying by type. If it's food, beverage, rental, there's a room rental on there, there's a service fee to break them out and those types. And I tell people that put it all on services lines. Don't try to put it on goods and services, just to keep it all consistent. Like I said earlier, try to keep things off of goods lines. So I don't know if that's a kosher suggestion, but that's what I've been telling people. And Jesse, the same way, other cost center managers.
One of the things I found on the invoice, if you can get the supplier in that situation, maybe they have like one line for catered food, and then I'm trying to think of what's a good example. If the supplier feels the need to itemize something, or you want to see it itemized, invite them to put it at the very bottom as like a note, or a little something at the very bottom, or on a separate page. Because if it doesn't make it through Brainware, somebody's got to index it. And if that human being doesn't go to the PO, if they go to the PO and they look at it, they can make some adjustments in Brainware and its complementary system on base. They can make those adjustments. But that is an actual human that has to do that. And sometimes it can take a few days for them to actually get that done.
Okay, so how long after someone or a supplier sends their invoice into accounts payable should they reach out to customer service, AP customer service, not seeing that it's not paid? Because of course, we've seen the range of this over the last 10 months. Of some suppliers expect it 2 days after they submit it. Some are, still waiting in there after 3 months. And so
I would say that first step through Brainware, you may even want to think it's going to take at least a week. And Bob, do you know if folks have you just went through Workday and had them look for invoices? You can go and see if it's not there. I would say look at the terms, and if it's like net 60 or net 90, it's going to float around in the system for a while. If it's net 30, or I would say if you don't see it in the system after a week, then you need to ask. You need to contact AP customer service. AP customer service at osu.edu is a general email, and they get farmed out by another human being to the different customer service people there. Believe it or not, there's only like 8 customer service people for the entire university, which is crazy.
Yeah.
So.
And there is a job aid in the ARC, I know, of how to find your invoice from your requisition to your purchase, or at least I was told that. I know how to do it. I'm just thinking if I can do this on the fly, because I know we have a couple more questions, and but I think it'd be great to demo this real quick. Just a demo. How do you find an invoice from, say, you got your requisition done, you put in the purchase order, and send in the invoice. You want to know where in the process that is. I'm just trying to think of a requisition to pull up on demand, and I'm coming up with a blank. But that is a good question. You
could probably also look at a PO.
I could, yeah. I was thinking about going through the whole system. So if anyone in the next 10 minutes here, if you have a requisition that you want to check on, please, or a purchase order, copy and paste it, put it in the chat, and I can look it up if you want to see how to find that supplier invoice.
And if you're not finding that invoice, then the chances are it's stuck in Brainware.
Yeah.
Because it won't get into Workday at all until it's matched completely and everything lines up.
Yeah. Okay.
Hey, Bob, we had a question earlier. It says, to clarify, we have to track when the vendor is finally entered and then email the invoice to AP, correct?
Correct. So in the system, it used to be that we could attach things in e-request and those invoices would be paid. That's what, 2-3 years ago now, when the service center was processing invoices. That stopped before Workday. And you had to send in the invoice, either the supplier or the department had to send in the invoice to accounts payable, referencing that PO number. But no matter what you're doing here in the new system, it's up to the department or the supplier to send in that invoice to accounts payable at osu.edu or AP invoices at osu.edu. So yes, it is up to the department. I mean, in a best case scenario, let's just say like a Buckeye buy. So you go through Staples, you put in the requisition through Marketplace, Staple gets the purchase order number, and then they bill back the department, or bill back the department through sending in that accounts payable to that email system, or I mean, they might do EDI, but the process is still about the same. So the supplier sends in the invoice in that situation.
Mhm.
But if you're used to working with a vendor that relies on you, or you ask for that invoice to be sent to you first before it gets sent in accounts payable, then it is your job to make sure that that purchase order is referenced with PO dash that number 1000 whatever. No other format. Make sure it's PO dash, because I see that as a common issue when I see purchase orders, invoices sent in. They say, oh, it's PO, or they leave the PO off and just put in the number, or that dash turns into a space or a number sign. That brainware is definitely not going to pick that up.
And thou shalt not write on an invoice.
Yes.
If you do any handwriting on there at all, brainware is going to go freaky and it's going to kick it back. So if you have the opportunity to annotate something, maybe through Adobe Acrobat, and put information that might be missing, like on the bottom, that's the best way to do that.
And we have another question to that is, when will they get notified that they have a PO, that it's actually now a PO instead of requisition? When it turns into a PO.
Yeah. So the default still is either it's faxed, or most of the time I see it as being faxed. I'm not exactly sure of the rules in purchasing on when they'll email and do other forms, but I know that the default is still fax, and that the cost center manager will get the email if there's some issue with getting the purchase order to that supplier. And that email address is written, but it's actually on the purchase order that the supplier would receive, saying send your invoices to AP invoices at osu.edu.
Okay, what about the, say the person who put it in, the office associate, like the actual PO, would they get an email as well?
They do not.
No.
So
Okay.
let's go through with Debbie. I just pulled up the one that Debbie Bowman put it in the chat. So let's get back to screen sharing. So Patty, let's go back to your question here. So I just pulled up that PO. So it's to Roscoe Village Foundation. So let's go back to the requisition. So Debbie put in this requisition request. When the requisition is completed and then sourced into a PO, she gets an email from Workday that says your requisition blah 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 has been successfully completed. So that is the notification to go check into the requisition and find the purchase order. So we're in the requisition now. So what I do is I pull up that requisition, I go down to the lines, either goods lines or services lines. This one is services. Scroll over to sourced, the source column, and it will say PO line 1. So what I do is I click on that line, and then I click again on the purchase order. So that brings up the purchase order. So you're here, you're questioning, okay, so what do I look at here? So this gives you the information on the PO. And you can do a lot of things from this screen right here. You can see that it's been issued, that it's been fully paid per what Workday requirements are. It gives you who is the buyer on there, who's requested it, the information about what was put on the requisition, the internal memo, whatnot. Then you go to the services lines. And now I want to know, okay, so I'm looking at this, and let's just say I just click here first and see the balances, and I see that the liquidated amount is the same amount as the purchase order amount, and there's 0 remaining. So, oh, great, the invoice is paid, I'm done. Well, not quite. And the good news is that you have a liquidated amount in there, but the next place to go is the business document line. So that will show the requisition number and the invoice number. Now, the access that we gave most of you here on the call, I don't know if this gives you all these panels, but it should. So when you click into the view supplier invoice line, we see that we have a supplier invoice.
Can I make a real quick comment about that, Bob?
Sure.
The supplier invoice is the actual number. The supplier invoice, quotation marks, is actually, of course, what the system generates, and that would have been called the voucher number in PeopleSoft.
Yes.
So there's more than one invoice. Now, if we go look at the under invoice reference information, that far right-hand column, and go down to see suppliers possessive invoice number, which is what RORQ.
Yep. Yeah. So here is, that's a good clarification there. So supplier's invoice number means the invoice number that was put on the actual invoice. And a quick note on that, let's say you have 5 speakers for the same conference and they all use the date as their invoice date. Brainware is, from what I understand, that will get caught up because it's all the same supplier's invoice number. So if you're trying to help suppliers out with, they don't do invoicing too often and you have multiple, make that supplier invoice or let them know to make that supplier invoice number as unique as possible. So that's their invoice number. And then, like you said, this is the voucher number. So what do we see here? We see that it's been approved, been matched, and paid. Okay, so let's check out the matching summary. Oh, not the matching. So we won't know activity. So what do we look at? What do we find here? So we found that a payment went out on 10/20 or 10/14. Oh, wow, look at that. Debbie, it's today. Status is complete, unreconciled. And it has the transaction reference, which sometimes I share that with the vendor if they're questioning where it went. And this, we know it went by check. So the payment was made today by check to the remit to location today, 10/14, and reconciliation status from old PeopleSoft world. I know that unreconciled for a check means that it hasn't cleared their bank yet, the supplier's bank yet. And when that says reconciled, it means someone received it and deposited it. So, I mean, oftentimes if you see this payment type here as EFT, that whatever the payment date says is that they should receive that payment that same day. So the check is going to be in the mail. Let's see. Let's ask Thalia to close the loop on that one.
Yes. The checks are mailed out the same day that they're printed.
All right.
Unless there's some reason foreign suppliers are a flag that they might be held back. Now, thing to remember about the checks is they're actually like 80-pound cardstock and they're trifold and they're not the most sturdy of things to be put in the mail. And I don't know if AP would want me to tell you this, but if you're here on main campus, you can actually designate that you can pick the check up yourself and mail it. And I actually used to do that when I worked for the College of Pharmacy, because then I can put it in an envelope and include a nice little note to the supplier saying, thank you. Oh, but yes, they do mail out the same day they print. For the most part.
Good to know. Good to know. And just, I know we're at the close of our session here, but since we're on this PO payment process, I just want to point out that you can get a copy of the purchase order in the PO panels, the purchase order panels. So you can do print runs and get a PDF of the purchase order there. But yeah, you just get used to navigating this. I mean, the nice thing about this is that in Workday, at least you can go from the requisition to the purchase order to the supplier invoice. Now, not everyone has access to dive into the supplier invoice panels, but at least it's fully transparent in Workday, at least a lot more transparent than eRequest to PeopleSoft was. So,
Bob, I was gonna say, and then there's always process history there. You can always
Oh.
look at process history and see who's the last person who handled it. If it's
So-
something that quote unquote has to be received, that means that somebody in mail services has to approve it.
Sure. So
So
just to visualize that, yep, it's always good. I'm very comfortable with navigating these process. If it's either business process or process history, it's what it's called. But check that out. That'll give you whose work list it's on. This one we know it's complete because it's been through all of the approvers. Zach approved it in the service center. Thank you, Zach. And step completed. So purchase order issue event was completed on February 24th. And they're now just getting their check. Okay. Yeah, that's definitely concerning one there. All right, so I'll stop share on that one. And let's see. So when's the next session? I mean, we can start letting people go here, and I can stay on to answer some more questions.
They are free to go if they would like. The next session begins at 11 a.m. and that will be with Debbie Lewis on Qualtrics.
11 a.m. It's 12
Wow.
o'clock.
Sorry, it is at 1 a.m. You know, I'll just stop now.
1 p.m. Debbie and
Thank
Jared
you.
on Qualtrics.
That's it. Thank you, Bob.